Well, a lot depends on this season. I mean, he can say that he wants to play in the year 14 next year, and if it's not with the Eagles, it would be somebody else. But who's going to be interested if he doesn't have the kind of season that he's supposed to have? I mean, he has to show that he's not a victim of father time yet. He's going to be 34 years old, I believe, and two, he has to show that his Achilles is in the past. That Achilles tear he suffered week 2 is now in the past. So he's got a lot to prove. If he plays to his level or to what his level should be at this stage of his career, I think the Eagles will bring him back. Sure.
You got your Mega Mac guys here on Birds 365 on a Football Friday. Now, you see that smiling face, Ed Kracz? That alone should give you reason to hit the like button right now. Because you got 3 tough guy football, supposedly insiders, follically challenged. We can tell that for damn sure.
Yeah. 2.5 tough guys. I'm not going to put myself in the category of Jody McDonald and Ed Kracz.
I don't think either one of us will be going out. Any of the 3 of us will be out picking a fight afterwards. But if
Ed, we're getting behind Ed. Trust me.
Okay.
Well, we are in the follically challenged club. There's no denying that, fellas.
But that does not prevent you from hitting the like button right now. Do us a Friday favor and go ahead and like us here on Birds 365. All right, Ed Kracz, Jaquiski Tartt in the fold. And more than a veteran minimum contract, you and John both reporting that yesterday. If it's like the Anthony Harris contract, it's an extra couple of $100,000, which, damn, I wish somebody would throw me a couple extra $100,000.
Yeah, I'll take it.
But if you're looking at the percentage of the overall cap with which a team has to work in the National Football League, it's not a major deal. I was a little surprised since he played on the veteran minimum last year. Were you?
Yeah, I was surprised he was still out there. I had kind of forgotten that he was still out there, to be honest with you. But yeah, he's just one of a few Band-Aids this team has, right? I heard you talking before I came on about, what this team looks like beyond this season. And, he's one of those guys on one of those contracts that is up after the end of this season. But I think it's a good signing. I mean, he's a veteran guy. He's been in the league for since 2015, I think.
2015, yeah.
Yeah. And I was saying, and I talked about this with John, that must have been a heck of a secondary Samford had together.
Yeah.
James Bradbury was a cornerback that came into the NFL in 2016 in the second round, and Tartt was a safety in 2015 who came into the league as a second-round pick. So I don't know what Samford's record was then or who the coach was, but he did a good job putting the secondary together.
Yeah, he should have gotten fired. I don't know who it was, but if they had a bad defense at that level with Tartt and Bradbury, yeah, he's got to be out of there. Jeffrey Lurie's getting him out of there, baby.
Yeah.
You can't succeed with that.
Yeah, but I think Tartt's I think Tartt will help, regardless of the dominoes that will fall now that he's in the fold, whether that's Anthony Harris or, Kayvon Wallace takes a seat. Kayvon Wallace, I think, was supposed to be Jaquiski Tartt by this point in his career. But, he hasn't developed. He's had some nagging injuries that have kind of set him back a little bit. But, so far it hasn't happened for Wallace, and that's why Tartt has to be here, is because Wallace hasn't developed the way they would like. And I think Tartt's interesting to see him on the field again. He was the safety that dropped that pass in the NFC Championship game, right? An potential interception, right, in his hands that would have given the 49ers the ball near midfield. And, the Rams took advantage and marched down to tie the game at 17-all with less than 7 minutes to go in that NFC Championship game. And I'll give Tartt credit. He did drop that INT that could have, helped the 49ers be the team in the Super Bowl, but he came out and he answered questions afterward, and he didn't give any excuses. So that kind of accountability, wins some praise from me.
Yeah, I remember Jalen Reagor after the Giants game did the same thing, much less of a stage, but I had a lot of respect for Jalen Reagor for doing that, especially in this era where you can hide if you want to. We're not allowed in the locker room. Hopefully that changes this year, but So anytime players do that, I think it does say a lot about their football character, as Nick Sirianni would say. You know, it's interesting. We've talked a lot about Tartt this week, Ed, because it's the off season, and people are really hyped about this deal. And I think it's a good deal. I've said that pretty consistently. I think it's a smart decision. Um, I think it's a nice insurance policy. Um, I think there's a chance he's a starter in Detroit on September 11th. I think there's a little chance, small chance he's not even on this team. But I think the one thing it is 100% clearly is a message to Kayvon Wallace that this is it. You know, you better show up this summer or you're not part of this picture. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I know that Howie doesn't like getting rid of his draft picks, but he's done it in the past. You know, Sharif Miller came, I think, in 2018, that vaunted 2018 class. He was the one that didn't quite make it, the defensive end from Penn State, but they moved on from him quickly. So I would think, yeah, Wallace is definitely in the crosshairs here. If he does not show what he is capable of in the summer, then yeah, I think he could be gone. And Tartt again gives you some depth at that position. I don't think it was a matter of, oh my gosh, can Marcus Epps play? I think it's a matter of they need depth at that position. What happens if Harris goes down or Epps goes down? Then who do you have? So, Tartt gives you that guy, whether he's a starter or not, he brings depth to that position. And I think that's the most important thing about his signing is the depth that he brings. And of course, Wallace, like we said, he could be on his way out. We haven't seen. I don't think we've seen the Eagles cut too many draft picks. I know they had that tackle from.
Well, they moved on from Rasul and Sidney at the same time. I guess that was their third year. Was it their third year?
They came in 17, and I think they were here through 19. So yeah, I think that they moved on after the 19 season.
So, and those are. That's a second round pick and a third round pick. And Rasul has kind of really took off in Green Bay last season. So good for him. But, and Sidney even has turned into at least a competent player now that he's back home in Seattle. But, those were difficult decisions to make. And they moved on from those players.
Yeah, I think they would definitely move on from Kayvon unless he can show that he can be a part of this team, and it could happen by the end of summer if he doesn't produce in the exhibition games or practices that they're going to have. Then that they'll probably move on from him. I think Harris and Tartt are safe. I do. I think they'll keep both those veterans. I think it would be more Wallace that would be more in jeopardy if he doesn't produce.
All right, Eddie. Let me ask you about another guy who we brought up in the first segment. John did. And that's Brandon Graham. He was here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel earlier this week and said he'd like to play 15 seasons. He's entering his 13th, so I'm not a math whiz, but that one I can do. 3 more seasons for Brandon Graham. And he did note that if need be, he would play for another organization if the Eagles and he weren't on the same page as to what his value was going forward and the like. How many years do you think Brandon Graham's got left in him?
Well, a lot depends on this season. I mean, he can say that he wants to play in the year 14 next year. And if it's not with the Eagles, it would be somebody else. But who's going to be interested if, he doesn't have the kind of season that he's supposed to have? I mean, he has to show, A, that he's not a victim of father time yet. He's going to be 34 years old, I believe. And 2, he has to show that his Achilles is in the past. That Achilles tear he suffered week 2 is now in the past. So he's got a lot to prove. If he plays to, his level or to what his level should be at this stage of his career, I think the Eagles will bring him back. Sure. But if he doesn't, who's going to want him? I mean, he's got to show that he can play. I mean, what other team's going to want somebody at his age and coming off a season that might not have been very good? We'll have to wait and see. But I think if he plays to what the Eagles think he can, I think he'll be back for year 14. I think he'll be in that year-to-year contract club with Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce and some of these other veterans that the Eagles are going year to year with. But I think, if he plays to his level, he doesn't have to worry about going anywhere else. The Eagles will bring him back.
Yeah, you're right, and people don't like when you don't throw the hot take out there, but Brandon is 34 years old, Ed, and he's coming off an Achilles injury, and this whole game is based on sort of explosion. Now he's in phenomenal shape. We saw him. I mean, he is just a monster from a weight room standpoint. So you see, he's used his time well. But if he doesn't have that explosion, he's not the same player, and that's what it's all about. And you just have to wait and see with Achilles and the 34-year-old man. I mean, it's a young man's game. But I got to tell you, pre-injury, I don't know if it's possible, but if it is possible, because Brandon obviously was a Super Bowl hero, arguably made the biggest play in the modern Eagles history, at least going back to 1960 when he strip sacked Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I think Brandon Graham is still underrated after all these years, and because of the sack numbers, and everybody wants big sack numbers. And you and I have talked to many coaches, opposing coaches over the years, opposing players. The offensive coaches would always say, man, we got to block Brandon. We got to block Fletcher. If anything, he to me has always been underrated in Philadelphia. Is that your take as well? Or do you think people realize what Brandon Graham was for this organization and remains?
Well, I think that play in the Super Bowl changed the perception of Brandon Graham. Listen, he's a guy that this will be his 13th year in the league, and as a defensive end, he has not had a double-digit sack season. I mean, I'm not sure how many players you can say that of that have played 13 years on the edge in this league that didn't.
Yeah, he's not a finisher because he's short.
Well, he is. You're right about the explosion. He does come off the line quickly, and he may even. It's interesting when you hear these players talk about what they're doing during practices and what we've seen them do. And he's been a guy that's been kind of lined up as an outside backer at times. We've seen Brandon Graham go inside on occasion to play at the tackle position. So they're going to move him around, I think, a little bit. And you're going to have to be able to do that in Gannon's defenses. You're going to have to be able to kind of drop into coverage sometimes. Now, Brandon wasn't a big fan of that when Billy Davis came to town with Chip Kelly. And tried to switch into that 3-4 defense, and Graham really struggled to play as an outside backer. But as far as his, the perception of him being underrated or overrated, I think he's right where he needs to be. I mean, maybe he's a little underrated, but he did make that huge play in the Super Bowl, and that will forever live forever for as long as we're alive and the Eagles fans are alive. But, he just hasn't put together that 10, 11, 12 sack season that would really stamp his legitimacy as a Hall of Fame type candidate.
Let me ask you one more Brandon Graham question, and I'll take it off the field and into the contract room. Brandon has been a guy, correct me if I'm wrong, who's been very willing to help the Eagles when money needs to be moved around. And usually it's 90% advantageous to a player because it means more money immediately in their pocket. So it gives the team salary cap flexibility. But he's a guy who's had his contract redone several different times. You stick around for 12 years, they're going to ask you to do this a bunch of times. And he has done just that for the Eagles. Does that play at all in future contract considerations? That your agent and the player bent over backwards to try and lend you a helping hand? I'm not saying they're willing to take a haircut and take less money, but it's still a restructuring of your contract, and you're doing a solid by the organization. Does the organization feel any obligation toward, if they're sitting on the fence, maybe giving Brandon Graham a better offer to stay and continue his Eagle career?
Yeah, Howie does get a sentimental attachment to some of these players. We've seen it in the past. And, there's, as a player, if you've come into the league, in 2010, I mean, think about where we were. We might have had hair back in 2010. That's a long time ago. as a player, you got to think, this team, I've been with this team for 1 year. So there's probably a feeling from the player that, I want to stay here. I want to finish my career here. Not too many guys get that opportunity. We'll probably see it with Jason Kelsey. We saw it with Brent Selleck. And I'm sure there's some others, but, I think there would be kind of a feeling like, if you're Brandon Graham, let's take what they offer us because I want to play here as long as it's fair. And I think from the Eagles' point of view, we've seen Howie Roseman show that sentimental nature towards some other players. See, I think the organization loves what Brandon Graham represents, and I think they would be willing to give him a fair deal. Now, again, he has to show that he still has enough explosion to be a force at this level. They're not just going to hand out, $10 million or $8 million, whatever it's going to take to bring Brandon back for another year just because he's Brandon Graham. He's going to have to live up to his end of the bargain to get a deal like that. But I think if all things being considered, yes, I think the Eagles would want to bring him back and let him finish his career here. And I think Brandon would love that.
Yeah. And to Jody's point, I would say, I'm not going to say everybody, and Andrew Brandt's going to be on the show an hour or two, and maybe he can talk about this, Jody, but well over 90% of contracts, it's written in modern contracts that, look, if we have to restructure and give you your money up front, we don't have to get your approval. So most of those contracts, the Eagles restructure, they set it up that way. That says, look, if we need money, we might restructure. We might give you your money up front. It's not going to hurt the player, and they just do it. So it's not a matter of approval in more cases. And Ed's right from the sentimental standpoint. Howie's had a history of being sentimental. Maybe that's one of his weaknesses. And you got to evaluate something in the moment. Is the guy helpful to the team? But when you have somebody who's done as much for your organization as BG, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. It becomes difficult not to be sentimental. They were able to do it with Malcolm Jenkins. You got to make these difficult decisions. And if you had, Jody was talking about 10 months in advance, if you had to pin me down right now, I would say in 2023, odds are Brandon Graham's not going to be an Eagle. Odds are. And if he wants to play somewhere else, he'll get a job, but probably be 1 year. And I think that would be sad because you always want to see people. And I want to put Brandon in this category, but there's all these, images of great players going back to Johnny Unitas and Joe Namath playing in a different uniform, and even Emmitt Smith. It stinks to me, but hey, if you still think you got something left in the tank, you got to go out and play. And I think Brandon pretty clearly here on JAKIB Sports said he's going to do that. And I think it's going to happen.
But let me take John's point and answer me this, Ed. If Brandon Graham goes elsewhere, if we can absolutely determine it's not a quote-unquote money grab, that the Eagles offer him a $5 million deal and somebody else offers him 6 or 6.5, and he just says, yeah, I need the extra $1.5 million, then that would be something that we could debate and say, does he really need that? If it's not, if the Eagles make him a legit offer and he goes elsewhere, will that take an edge off the fact that Brandon Graham is one of the most popular Eagles with the fan base here in town?
Well, it didn't hurt Brian Dawkins' stock. I know that was a little different.
Yeah, but that was Eagles. Eagles made that decision to move on from Brian Dawkins. That wasn't Brian Dawkins moving on from the Eagles. If the Eagles have an offer on the table and Brandon decides to go somewhere else, now if it's an outrageous difference between the two offers, Eagles are offering him veteran minimum, somebody else is offering him $7 million. Well, guess what? I'm going too. There's no sentiment involved there. But if the offers are relatively similar and he decides to go elsewhere because another team is offering slightly more, do you think that will hurt Brandon with Eagle Nation?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not. It's always about doing what's best for your financial situation, I would think. But listen, if it comes down to that and it's close, Brandon's not going to go for, 1 or 2 or maybe even $3 million more to another team. I would be really surprised if he did that. He likes his legacy here in Philadelphia. I think he's setting himself up for, maybe getting into the broadcasting career here in Philadelphia when he's through with his playing career. I would be surprised if he were to take a little bit more to go elsewhere rather than stay in Philadelphia and really cement his legacy. Every fan's different, of course, but I would like to think that fans wouldn't hold that against him. He gave this city this will be 13 years coming up, 13, terrific seasons. And okay, he goes to finish somewhere else because he needed the money. Then maybe I think fans might be a little bit more understanding. But this is a tough city. It's a tough fan base.
Yeah.
I might be giving them too much credit here, but I would like to think that, they would give Brandon a pass if it came down to that.
We know it. We know it every day on the stream. It's a tough city. It's a tough fan base, Ed Kracz. And what have you done for me lately? So let's get it back on the field. We've been talking too much future this morning, Jody. The 2022 Eagles. We've been asking this question, so I'll throw it at you, Ed. I think, most people have speculated, look, the Eagles have everything they need on offense. So now it's up to the quarterback. It's up to Jalen Hurts, right? And, they gave Howie Roseman gave Jonathan Gannon everything he wanted. Jordan Davis, Son Reddick, James Bradbury, Kaiser White, Nakobe Dean. They have all this, even add Jaquiski Tartt, all this talent on the defensive side. A lot of pressure on Jonathan Gannon to produce. Nick Sirianni's sort of skating under the radar, man. Everybody's happy with Nick Sirianni. You start losing games. They have that easy schedule on paper, first month of the season. Let's say the Eagles come out of that 2-2. Are people starting to crow a little bit about Nick Sirianni?
Yeah, people were crowing about Nick Sirianni last year after 5 games.
Some wanted him fired. Yeah, but they were terrible. They were 2-5 at that point.
There's a lot of pressure on Nick Sirianni, no question. I mean, you mentioned Gannon, you mentioned Hurts, but the head coach has to produce some wins. And the schedule, everybody says it's easy. I don't know about that. I mean, the Vikings are going to be good for a home opener. They have they're going to be a challenge. There's some teams in there that can upset the Eagles or beat the Eagles. I don't know if it would be an upset, but Nick Sirianni's got to win. He's got to come out. There's a lot of expectation on this team. This almost feels now like a team that's built to win the way this offseason has played out. And you talked about the future, and there's a lot of one-year contracts on this team. So this is a team now that has to put all these pieces they brought in and make it work. And that's up to the head coach to make that happen. We just saw him have this this leisurely spring where they
leisurely
weren't on the field a whole lot. They spent the extra week in the weight room. Yippee. That's great. But, now they should be in the weight room here in these next few weeks before camp opens. So, you don't know if that's the right approach. The Eagles are hoping it's the right approach. It better be the right approach for Sirianni's sake, because you're right. If this team limps out to a 2-3 start or has a losing record as we head into the early part of October, people are going to crow about Nick Sirianni's job. And, the Eagles, of course, will be patient. They're not going to jump and fire the guy mid-season, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on Nick Sirianni to win, more so than anybody else in this organization, I would think.
All right, Eddie, you used the key word there, expectations. There are 3 key guys that I want to know about coming into the Eagle season, one of which I don't think we'll be hearing from, but the other 2 we definitely have to hear from. Jeff Lurie, probably not going to get on the record, Howie Roseman, and Nick Sirianni. When asked about expectations, what do you think each of those guys will say? Roseman, Sirianni. What do you think you're going to get before the season starts from them when asked about expectations for this year?
Well, I think they'll try to temper them a little bit as best they can, but because that's just kind of, I think, their nature, I would guess. They'll probably try to tamp them down a little bit and say, we have to put in the work each day, some kind of cliche.
Whoa. Put in the work. Didn't we just say The Eagles are averse to work. We just clarified that, didn't we, Ed Kracz?
Yeah, yeah, and we'll see what training camp looks like. There wasn't, it was a pretty watered down camp last year in Sirianni's rookie season. So
90 minutes. Get off. I like that.
Yeah,
by the way, Nick.
yeah,
Keep it.
Yeah, but those joint practices were great, and there was a lot of good work that happened with those joint practices with the Jets and the Patriots. I think it was this year.
4-0, baby. 4-0 in joint
4-0. I mean, yeah. So there'll be some work put in, but yeah, we just saw a spring where there was a little too leisurely for my liking. But I think as far as expectation goes, I think that they'll try to tamp them down as best they can. They don't want to put any undue pressure on themselves either, or on the players to produce either. So I would think that they'll try to manage the expectations as best they can. But in my opinion, the expectation train is, roaring down the tracks here, filled with Eagles fans expecting, a team to get into the playoffs and make some noise in the playoffs. Now that's, months down the road here. But listen, you got to get off to a quick start to keep these fans' expectations rolling along.
All right, Ed, let me try and pin you down a little bit more. Will either of the two reiterate the term transition that Jeff Flory used last year?
That's done, Jody.
Johnny Mack wrote a good column this week or last week, whatever it was, a couple days ago, about transitions out the window. He tied it to Jaquiski Tartt, which I'm still trying to understand, but its general sentiment I agree with. There's no more transition. This is a win now season, and you think that they both will try and level it off and not let the expectations grow at?
Well, yeah, the transition. I mean, they've had 2 drafts now, I think, since Lurie said that, right? They had last year's draft and this year's draft. So
yeah,
the transition was kind of, as far as going from an older club to more of a younger club. And that's where the draft comes in. And they had, in my opinion, a pretty strong draft last year, getting several quality players in the first 4 or 5 rounds. And I think they had another very good draft this year, even though it was limited in quantity. I think they got a couple players that are going to help them initially and even in the long term. So, yeah, you cannot hide behind the transition word any longer. This has been transitioned. And now, to me, like I said earlier, this is a team that looks to me like it's built to win. When you look at bringing in Bradbury on a 1-year deal, Tartt on a 1-year deal, I mean, they could have just said, let's let Zach McPherson handle the edge, or whoever else, Mac McCain. Hey, let's see Marcus Epps and Kayvon Wallace in the safety. We're still transitioning. But no, that's no longer the case. This is a team I think is built to win right now.
And Ed kind of hit the nail on the head where I was when I wrote that piece about Tartt, exactly what he said. If you're in a transition or you're in a rebuild, you have no problem throwing Marcus Epps and Kayvon Wallace out there. Let them sink or swim. You don't care. You're not worried about that Band-Aid. Same thing with Zach McPherson. Let him go out there and play. If he can't play, let Tate Gowan go out there and play. If he can't play, let Mac McCain. But no, they went out and got James Bradbury. So the indication that you're willing to bring in the case of Tartt, it's a Band-Aid, probably more than that with Bradbury. But when you're willing to bring in these 1-year pieces, it shows an indication you're not thinking about the rebuild. You're trying to think about winning games this year. But I want to shift it. I want to give the cheap plug, si.com /NFL/Eagles. Read Ed Kracz there. Myself as well. We started our top 25 Eagle countdown. So check that out every day. And I'll throw Jody this as well, get him involved. So we did number 25 yesterday. These are the best pure football players on the Eagles, not value, not positional value, where obviously Jalen Hurts would be very important. Just the best pure football players on the Philadelphia Eagles. Our top 25. Ed came up with his list. I came up with our list. We mashed them together, so there's no sort of bias. We didn't look at each other's list. Number 25 debuted yesterday. Jody Mack, can you give us a guess? Don't look. Give us a guess.
First things first. Who do you two submit your list to that does the combination of them?
We did it at the same time, and we tallied up the votes.
Oh, you did it yourselves?
Yes.
You didn't have a independent third arbitrator.
No, I was thinking about Price Waterhouse, but I couldn't get him on.
That's why I was asking. You didn't ask me. I know that.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe you had an editor or someone you sent it to and said, "Listen,
I
do the math on the fact that Ed's got Jaquiski Tartt not on the list, and John's got him at number 12. I'm trying to figure out.
I got him at number 2.
Middle.
Jaquiski Tartt, best coverage safety in football.
Well, we assigned point values too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we took our lists, we did them independently of each other, then we emailed them to one another, and we put them together, and we assigned points. You got 25 points if you were in the number 1 spot, 24 in number 2. And so on down the line.
Okay, so there was a mathematical theorem you were.
Yes, there was a very high.
It's never good. It's never good when math is involved, but that's why I wanted Price Waterhouse. But
I will honestly say I did not check out the number 25 that you guys have already started with, but I'll do a little quick math myself here, seeing as you have 22 starters, 11 on offense, 11 on defense. So this has got to be a quasi part-time player that is going to be sharing some of the role but isn't a starter, and where does he fall? All right, here's who I'm going with at number 25, Quez Watkins.
Well, he was in the conversation. He was near that group.
Yeah, that's a great guess.
It was a very good guess, Jody.
I liked how you narrowed that down too. 22 starters. That was well done, Jody. I have to
thank you. I think it well. I might even take up becoming a broadcaster at some point in my life.
I'm going to tell you, I had Quez Watkins 25th on my list.
Yeah. Did you?
Wait a second.
Oh, smart minds think alike.
No,
see, Kracz and I, where's the body go?
That was me. I had Quez 25th.
I'm looking at it right now. Here's the Price Waterhouse edition. But
I mean, I agree with McMullen.
Yes, shocking.
It was 25. Damn it. I wanted to agree with Kracz. No fun when I agree with McMullen.
Yeah. He'll pop in our 25 here somewhere based on probably my evaluation.
Right. Well,
Ed had him higher than I did.
Unless Ed's got him number 3, he's going to be in the next couple of guys.
Ed had him higher than I did.
Okay,
so there's a little foreshadowing. But I had Quez at 25.
Yeah.
Through the Price Waterhouse voting, though, Ed, tell him who number 25 was. It fits Jody's definition.
Yes, it was Jody was on the right track with a quasi player. It's Jack Driscoll, the maybe the starting right guard. I don't see it, but I think Ziamalo will be the starting right guard. But Driscoll's a guy, started 9 games for him last year, played almost 50% of the snaps. The problem I had, and I didn't have Driscoll on my list. This was John putting him.
John's a big Driscoll guy. He thinks he's going to win the right guard. He's just woefully wrong. Unless Isaac gets hurt. Yeah, if Isaac gets hurt, then Driscoll slides right in. But
then Driscoll Isaac's going to be. Then what do you got when Driscoll gets hurt eventually? Because he gets hurt. That's why I left him off the list, because he's too unreliable at this stage, right? I mean,
but then again, so does Isaac. Both of those guys are an injury waiting to happen.
That's true.
Yeah, but Isaac's got to have more of a career at this point with his injuries.
That's why I knocked Tartt down from number 2, because he's missed 31 games in 5 years.
Understood. All right, Eddie, thanks for hopping on, buddy. You got plans for the weekend? You going to do anything silly?
No, nothing silly at all. Probably just kind of sit around. I was hoping to get up to the U.S. Senior Open in Saucon Valley. I'm still waiting to see if some tickets come through for tomorrow to get up there and watch Jay Haas and Rocco Mediate and some of these heroes of my yesteryear.
Phil going to play on that tour too? I know he's got the whole live thing going, but he's old enough. He could play senior, right?
He could, and he'd probably do well on it, but I don't think so.
No,
he's not playing the Senior Open in Saucon Valley anyway.
Hey, by the way, Ed, because I don't think the Eagles have said this, so I'll do it on the show. I think it was the Seal News of all people. I guess they gave it to them first. Jason Kelsey's Ocean Drive thing is going to be on Wednesday, I believe, of next
this upcoming week.
I believe.
Very nice.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe. Just giving Ed a heads up in case you want to go down the shore.
They got plans on the 29th. It's all you, John. Unless Jody wants to swing it for us.
See, I'll duty next Wednesday. What do I got Wednesday? I got to do a WIP show, not a non-usual day.
Yeah, I got to do Birds 365. It's tough to get down there, perhaps.
Duty calls.
Because if Kelsey's pouring, I'm drinking, which is not going to be good.
That was
for
a great
us
event
up
last
early.
year.
Yeah, Ed was there last year.
I was there last year. A lot of fun. He didn't have as many teammates as I think he'll have this year because they had just put it together like 3 days before the event.
Yeah.
But I think now with more time to prepare, it'll probably be even better this year. So if you didn't get there last year, it was a terrific event. Jason's pouring behind the bar, drinking Jello shots and swigging beers, and it was a lot of fun. So
yeah, now maybe I'll have to make that trek down.
Somebody's going to get down there. Yeah, Eddie, thanks, bud. Have a good weekend. We'll get you up again next week as you reveal the top 25 Eagles. So I'll continue to take guesses if called upon.
All right,
Ed Kracz from